but I'm going to do this.
we get is that changing Towamencin's whole form of government for the sewer cell is not worth it. Fair enough. The commission has yet to receive feedback suggesting that we change much, so defaulting the township's provisions to the Class 2 code seems appropriate. The Home Rule Handbook describes a handful of common home rule provisions that reference state law, tax limits, and bidding thresholds, notably. We just took that idea to the extreme. Next slide, please. Concern number 3. There's not enough direct democracy in Towamencin. The source of concern is historical Towamencin civic events. The solution is to add initiative and referendum provisions to the charter. The source of solution is the Home Rule Handbook, other charters, and other states. The difference from our current form of government is that we'd have broader possible use of ballot questions. In both the sewer cell situation and the bridge to nowhere situation, Towamencin residents seem to be clamoring for a way to force the township's actions. Pennsylvania is a state that has very restrictive use of initiative and referendum. To compare, New Jersey is also a home rule state, but they do not have the individual charter setup like in PA. Their municipalities have a limited amount of forms of governments they're allowed to adopt, and the powers of every municipality are practically unlimited. In return, their citizens get uniform initiative options, and they generally have a more active ballot question culture. In New Jersey, sewer cells are required to go to ballot unless the system is distressed, and even then the purchasing utility must already service more customers than the selling utility. Nexera would not allow to be approach Towamencin with $115 million under New Jersey's laws, despite New Jersey having similar penetration of investor-owned water and wastewater utilities. Next slide, please. Concern number 4, initiative and referendum would bog down Towamencin's operations. Sorry. Okay, sorry, thank you. Concern number 4, initiative and referendum would bog down Towamencin's operations. The source of concern is feedback to the commission. The solution was a high 15% petition threshold and some exemptions for referendum. The source of the solution came from other home rule municipalities and the Board of Supervisors meeting attendance. The difference from our current form of government would depend on how in sync the Board of Supervisors are with resident will. I've had a few people tell me, look, Kofi, I'm against the sewer sale, but we elected these folks. I work a ton and don't want to be voting on everything the township does. Fine opinion. One of the requirements of home rule charters in Pennsylvania is that the governing body must be elected. Because they are elected, they generally have the trust of their constituents. It should be rare that elected officials make a decision so unpopular that their constituents go through the hoops required for initiative. 15% of registered voters in Towamencin adds up to about 2,000 people. To compare, the total amount of unique signatures collected for the Government Study Commission election was at most 1,600. Chris Monero from Plymouth said that they had no such initiative during his time on council. David McMahon from Norristown said that the sewer sale was the only time Norristown residents invoked their referendum provision. There are small municipalities in New England that have what's called a town hall form of government. That is to say, every resident is a part of the governing body and everything must be voted on by residents. I think we are too large for that type of government, and it might be illegal in Pennsylvania, even though it hasn't been proposed in any charters yet. Next slide, please. And the summary on the charter so far. The draft being presented was put on the website yesterday, and there are a few copies available in the meeting hall. I'm just going to present descriptions of each article in these reports. Article 1 is the construction of the charter. Section 106 defaults township provisions to the Class 2 Township Code. Article 2 defines elected offices. That's no changes from the Class 2 Township Code. Article 3 defines financial procedures. That's no changes from the Class 2 Township Code, and it explicitly retains limitations on the rates of taxation. Article 4 is new. It's initiative and referendum procedures. Gives residents the power to initiate proposed ordinances. It gives residents the power to initiate reconsideration of ordinances within 30 days of enactment. And it gives the township the power to put ordinances directly on the ballot. Section 408 is what I'd like to informally call the Nancy Becker provision. Nancy is an enthusiastic public commenter. At the last meeting, she suggested a provision that would require a referendum on asset sales. We wouldn't want to be voting on every time the township sells a mower, so we put in a percentage of revenue on the trigger. Not quite sure if it was constructed well, so we might come back with a different trigger or a different percentage. Next slide, please. And then Article 4 also has exemptions. That is the budget or capital program, personnel compensation, emergencies, ordinances related to elections, township powers preempted by home rule, and ordinances that would otherwise violate state law if passed. Article 5 is also new. It is the transparency article. It has light provisions surrounding digital availability of some information that is otherwise public, term information of elected officials and those appointed to advisory boards and authorities, and digital copies of documents that are available at the township building. Article 6 used to be Article 4, but we moved it, the right to public ownership of water. It prohibits the sale or long-term lease of water or wastewater to or stormwater systems. And then we fixed section 602 by adding the 2-year period to the lease restriction. And Article 7 is the general provisions. That's the transition provisions, severability amendments, and the July 1st effective date. And that's all I have. And do any of the commissioners have questions or comments on the current version of the draft? And Jen, did you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, then we can move to the presentation now that our guest is here. Nirol, could you pull up the DCED presentation, please? You just came in, so whenever you're ready.
I just want to thank you for coming out, Fred. I know it was a little bit of a drive for you, so we appreciate you coming out tonight. You just want to introduce yourself and then we can go through.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I feel like my back is turned to it.
You're welcome to move wherever you'd like.
Okay, well, great. I have these publications here also.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's not enough.
Actually, I think I'm going to move over here.
All right.
Oh, everyone's way. I can see it.
You're the guest of honor. Everyone's very excited to meet you. Except for everyone.
Yeah, your choice.
Thank you very much for having me. All right, my name is Fred Chapman, and I'm from the State Department of Community and Economic Development, Center for Local Government Services. We are a small office located inside of DCED. It's called the Governor's Center for Local Government Services. And we're located in the Keystone Building in downtown Harrisburg. I've been with DCED, I've been with the Commonwealth for almost 33 years. So I guess you can do the math, kind of telling my age here a little bit. I was with PennDOT for 17 years, and then the remaining of the time at DCD, I started in floodplain management, and then the last 9 years, a policy specialist, local government policy specialist, and I serve the Southeast region. So I serve Berks, Bucks, Chester, Montgomery, Delaware, as high as Lehigh Valley, actually. But I don't really consider Lehigh Valley the Southeast, but Commonwealth does. All right, I want to start with, I'm going a little backwards here. Normally we have questions afterwards. And I was telling Jen that I'm not going to allow questions afterwards. And why, Mr. Chapman, aren't you going to allow questions afterwards? Because I'm hoping to do a pretty good job in answering your questions up front so that you don't leave with a lot of questions about home rule. And if you do have questions afterwards, you will have my email, my phone number and things where you could call me and then we'll talk. But I'm hoping to address a lot of your questions and concerns ahead of time so that you won't leave here with a lot of questions. I have compiled a list of questions that I've received. Some are questions from here at the municipality, and some are frequently asked questions. So I'm hoping to address a lot of your questions with this list that I have here, and then also then we have the presentation. And I'm not going to be very long at all. All right, one of my first questions I have here is, if the municipality becomes home rule form of government, how can we resort back to second-class township after 5 years to propose to resort back to second-class township? Well, that was the question. Okay, how would we resort back to second-class township? After 5 years, you would do the process, you would resort back to the second-class township. The government can, it'll be on a referendum, and that's the way it would happen. But after 5 years, so that was one of the questions I was asked. Another one was, can home rule charter be drafted and recommended without the government study commission actually studying the township's existing form of government? Well, that I'll say, we are not solicitors, number one. And I want to point that out about DCED, misconception that we're the police, we're the revenue, or we're the state attorney general's office, or the auditor. We're not. So we will not sneak in on the meetings or hide outside underneath of the cars and try to catch people with cameras and things. That's not DCED. So therefore, we can't do anything. If they don't, we recommend. We are not solicitors, but we do recommend that happens. And not only that, but it should happen. It should happen. They should study, take their time and study the form of government, study our home rule publication here. And Title 53, Chapter 29 of the state law that governs the municipalities, it states here that the Government Study Commission shall study the form of government of the municipality to compare it with other available forms under the laws of the Commonwealth and determine whether or not it is in good judgment to proceed on, and it goes on and on and on. So what I will say is that you have a solicitor. So many of the questions that are legal questions, you should consult with an attorney or your solicitor. And even if you email me afterwards some questions, I probably won't answer them if they're legal questions, because that's why you pay a solicitor. You must bug your solicitor, because that will ultimately help you form your charter, make sure you're on track and in order, and avoid lawsuits down the line and all of that. If you do not consult with your solicitor. So I will say that, is the study of the existing form of government required prior to the drafting of a proposed home rule charter? Again, we're not solicitors, but if you read Title 53, Title 53 is the state law that governs municipalities. Your solicitor should be familiar with it. You all should be familiar with it, whether you're the commission board, whether you're our council or residents. Look it up. It's a state law that governs municipality. Now, those, if you want me to send that stuff to you, I can send you the cut and clip of those portions if you were to call me and ask me. So I can only answer questions, legal questions that are already in writing, that are already formed, not my own opinion or DCD's opinion, because we're not attorneys there. So, or if it's in our home rule publication. And I advise you to go on DCD website and get a publication. It goes down the list of everything with home rule. And that goes for the council, for the commission, everyone. Study this. Study this. You can find it on DCD's website, and it goes down, it lists everything, step by step, from the beginning of home rule all the way to the end of when it's when you're preparing the charter. Another question is, let's see here. It's after drafting, can a municipality draft a home rule charter without first studying existing home? I must have got that twice here. And then it says, alternative during a study after the home rule study. Okay, so this is saying that, again, do they have to do a study? This describes the process of steps in Title 53. The first 9 months are supposed to be to study. That's what the first 9 months are supposed to be. Now, and again, DCD will not be looking in the window to see when meetings are held or anything like that. But most home rules are successful when the study takes place, when you all take time to study the home rule, what it's all about, the form of government, different forms of government. That's what the first 9 months are for. The second is for the drafting of the charter. But the first 9 months, that's what it's for. It's to study home rule and other municipalities. See how it works. Also, do your homework and education. I call it TEC. Be very transparent. Educate yourselves and educate the public. You should want to educate yourself. In those first 9 months, that's what it's for, to educate yourself as well as educate the public. And then also communicate. That's what the C stands for. Communicate. You have to talk to whoever was the treasurer and whoever was the manager and this kind of thing, or the secretary. You have to talk to each other, communicate. That makes a successful home rule if that's what the township is looking to do. So those are just some tips that DCD offer. Another question, I guess, is in relating to that one, the Government Study Commission shall report its findings and recommendations to the citizens of the municipality within 9 months from the date of its election, except that it shall be permitted an additional 9 months if it elects to prepare and submit a proposed home rule charter, and an additional 2 months. So within the 9 months, but if you would like to add another 2 months on, you're able to do that. So in other words, this question was asking, within that 9 months, how will we really know if they studied? Well, you have to submit that document. And then DCD also gets that document. So, and again, DCD was going to get the document, but we're not going to police and find out if whether it was done in 9 months or whether it was done in 6 months or 4 months. That's not DCD's job to do that. But we advise the 9 months in order to really, really learn about home rule and your form of government. We advise that. But you'll see even in the presentation, there are some things, and even in our DCD home rule book, you will see there's some things that are advised and there's some things that are mandated. So those, you know, the terminology, you really have to pay attention to that, because there's some things that DCD advise or the state advises, and there's some things that they mandate. See, so it's not a lot of things that we kind of just mandate. A lot of times it's things that we advise so that it'll work smoothly and it'll work properly. And it's a system and it's an order. So let's see, what other questions do we have here? We have okay, here's one. Names of municipalities where the Government Study Commission proceeded in this manner. Well, we don't know many that have, not that we're aware of. Most government study commissions want to educate themselves on forms of government. So again, I'm not sure here, I'm just speaking because of other municipalities. We have a lot of municipalities out in the West that have went through home rule, you know, and so they're staying busy out there all around Johnstown and outside of there of Allegheny County and you know, all over out in the West. There's a lot of municipalities going through home rule. So a lot of these questions that I see here are some of the ones that were also my colleagues have had. You know, there's a policy specialist in the Northwest and the Southwest and, you know, and Central. So I've spoken to some of them as well, and they have some same questions. So, but again, we haven't really found many that do not, you know, take that full length of time. There are some that may not take the full 9 months, and maybe they said they did, but when they compile that form, that document, then that's how you can really tell whether or not you would want to take the full time again to study, not just the government commission study board, but also the council and the residents. Educate yourself. I will provide you also with resources when I have a list of resources of where you can go and find a lot of this information. But again, our DCD publication is probably the best because it starts from the beginning till the end. While the Government Study Commission must hold at least one public hearing, what is the usual range for the hearings? 1 or 2. 1, depending on the municipality. Some hold 1, some hold 2. What is the importance of the public hearings? Required for the public awareness. And again, we're back to that word, transparency. That's the purpose of having the public meetings, because you want to educate, and transparency. And so even without even coming here to the township here, again, I told you all the counties I'm in, and I speak to so many council and local government officials and talk to them about transparency and education. Educate the public, educate yourself, and be transparent. And I think you'll be fine. Another one is what is the average number of meetings for Government Study Commission? It varies with the committees. Some meet weekly, some meet bi-weekly or monthly. Some have subcommittee meetings. So it varies. Does DCD has recommendations on how best a Government Study Commission should proceed? Time taken to accomplish work, number of meetings, number of hearings. We can provide best practices, but we do not stipulate. All information, if you want to see the stipulations, they are in Title 53 again, and that's Chapter 29, Title 53. That is the municipalities, that's the state of Pennsylvania's municipal law that governs municipality. That's where you can find those things that actually stipulate and mandate. And again, that's where your solicitor, your attorney comes in at. So I don't know if the attorney is here to hear me talk. That's where she comes in at. Well, see, she's right here with a smile on her face. She looks just as friendly and nice. So you would have no problems out of her as far as, trying to get information. And I'm sure it's a lot of these things that I'm talking about you already are familiar with. All right. Let's see what else there is. Again, there was how many municipalities are currently in home rule? Home communities, we have, if you'll see it on the PowerPoint there up on page 8, on the PowerPoint on number 8 it will be, but there's 81. I think up there it says like 70 something, but there's 81 now, and there's throughout 7 counties. How many of those were created by petitions versus initially by the local government? There's a handful. Most are adopted by the municipality vote of ordinance. Can you comment on any positive benefits of home rule? Oh, of course. You'll see again some of the things on the slide when we go through it. But again, transparency, and most likely the residents want to change sometimes. That's usually I found that that's usually why home rule. We have one, I think it was Newcastle, that people came out overwhelmingly, and it's because you went down the list and asked them, we just want to change. It's not like they were doing a horrible job. That wasn't it. It was just that, we just want to be able to more so have power in our hands. We want to be able to be a part of and make some choices and some decisions as well, and actually feel like we're a part of. Another positive thing is that we find that the attendance, I go to a lot of council meetings. Delaware, I remember I was in Delaware County, and I was required to be at their meetings. They had some problems and issues, but I show up and I was the only person sitting out I don't even live there. I live in Sweater Township, but I was the only one sitting front and center and looking at all the council members. And then again, here comes Fred Chapman from Harrisburg at 7:30 p.m. The only one sitting there. It was like, what's going on? But the residents, they didn't come out. They didn't participate. So I think that's another one of the things that one of the positive about home rule. And another one is flexibility. They like the flexibility, with a lot of things. Flexibility, be able to hire people that actually know the job, hire people that, maybe that really wanted the position and want to be there. And also just our residential powers. They want, again, to be able to have some sort of power in their hands to feel like they are a part of. Okay, can you comment on any negatives that home rule charter has had on the current municipality? Not a lot. I don't hear a lot. A lot of my colleagues out in the West there, they seem to be moving pretty smoothly. They actually love it. So it's not really a lot. What is one particular thing though is that we've noticed there, DCD, is that when a municipality tries to be too detailed with the charter, when the Home Rule Commission tried to be too detailed with the charter itself, then sometimes that's not really good, because then it's difficult to change the charter after it's already. So, that's the only thing, is that when you're too detailed. But being detailed when it comes to the code, that administrative code, that's different, because that's just changed by a simple ordinance of vote. So that's where a lot of your, we tell a lot of municipalities, put a lot of things in, when you're going to home rule, in the administrative code, because those can be tweaked and changed, and by ordinance, very simple. When it's in the charter, it's just like, boom, it just has to be there, and you got to look at it for quite a while until it gets changed. So, so that's one of the downfalls. But again, and also when you're talking about the administrative code, detail is great for that. it's fine to be very detailed when it comes to the administrative code itself. But again, not the charter. Are government study commissions required to, again, here's another spend 9 to 18 months studying the local government. We strongly recommend this, that you know things like the second-class township code, how, for instance, things like how is the township tax, that kind of thing. Simple things like that. You know, the budget, when do the budget start, and all of those things. That's why you kind of study, you do your homework and study second-class township, study your municipality, study other municipalities that are similar to yours in home rule, study our publication, study Title 53, know kind of the ins and outs. That way, even if a resident walk up to you with some questions, you will know. So that's another one. Another one is, can a home rule charter and second-class township coexist? No, but can fall back on limitations. We will see that, we'll speak about limitations. How is it legal? How is the legality of a charter provision determined? Is there a court review process on passage, or do charters need to be challenged? Once the charter is drafted, the solicitor reviews it. Again, that's why you would get the solicitor very involved. She will review it to make sure nothing illegal is in it or anything like that. She'll also, she'll make sure herself that she's familiar with Title 53 and other government studies. So you won't have to worry, being that you have a solicitor here and it's going to be on working very diligently to make sure that you're good. Can home rule charter change zoning in the township? That was a good one. And the straight answer to that is no. So if anyone wants to know that, you'll see that also in the slide. No, that's an ordinance. You'll see that on the slide, and that's underneath the limitations. And that's another misconception when it comes to home rule. Many residents throughout Pennsylvania, sometimes they think, oh, well, if we go home rule, they can change anything. The charter will, you know, it can regulate and change. It'll change. That's not so. There are so many limitations that cannot be changed, and you'll see them on the slide. How is a home rule charter amended, and how often can it be amended? If you create a good home rule charter, you don't have to worry about a lot of amending. And that's why you take your time and study, take your time and do your homework. That's why you do it, and communicate. Talk to, you know, each other, talk to council, talk to the present person that's in a certain position before they're out of that position. Get to know them, communicate, find out what has once worked in the township, and then question them, communicate with them. Ask them, well, why hasn't this worked? Maybe it's something you already know, but I think if you kind of go out to lunch with them or something, you may hear something that you didn't know. So you're educating yourself. We're almost done with a lot of questions. It says, what is the primary motivation of a municipality seeking home rule? And again, it's refined across Pennsylvania: accountability, flexibility, and giving the residents power. So basically, they want to see accountability. Many times when municipalities aren't in the home rule, we know many, and there's no accountability. I know a lot of municipalities that way. There are some municipalities where there's a lot of accountability. And again, you don't always switch. You're not, if you decide to adopt home rule, a charter, it's not because it was such a horrible, you know, things were going horrible before. That's not it. That's not usually always it. And a lot of times we don't hear that as a lot of the reason. More so we hear, hey, look, I want to be more involved. Or, hey, look, I like the flexibility of home rule. Things like that, you know. So can a home rule charter allow for the privatization of police and fire, or amend any budget allocation allocated to them? The answer is no. There is one of those limitations I was telling you about. It'll never affect union or civil service. What are the limitations of home rule charter? You'll see that in slide six. There's several: zoning, taxes. They can't just create new taxes under home rule. So whoever kind of, sometimes that's another misconception, but no, you can't. Now, there's caps. Yeah, they can lift caps and things under home rule, but not create new taxes. Can a home rule charter stop the sale of a sewer? Typically, no. But again, you want to make sure that the municipality does its homework, study the PA Sewage Facility Act. That is, again, one of the, under the limitations. You study the PA Sewage Facility Act. You'll see that on slide 6 up there. Is it normal for a study commission to tailor their study and scope to meet the specific needs, goals of the township? Absolutely. That's one of the main reasons, again, besides some of the others that I list, municipalities go home rule, what we found there at DCD, is they want to tailor it to fit their municipality. They're tired of things that are taking place that does not really fit here in this township. So therefore, when they go home rule, they want to tailor it so that certain things will fit this municipality. And not like just a regular, which our states sometimes have cookie cutter things. They think which works over here or work here, or, no, that's not. They go home rule because they want to customize what's going on here in your township. What is required of the Government Study Commission to prove that a study was performed? Again, I spoke about that. They must provide a report to elected officials saying that they will remain a second-class charter, and they give reasons of why. So again, in this report will be so detailed. Again, you'll see, how well they study. And again, it's not always that again, it's so hard, whether it's 9 months or 8, unless you kind of know exactly how often they're meeting. And sometimes maybe they don't need those meetings like that. Maybe they're, and some may be doing their homework. And if some of the Board of Commission, they're doing Government Study Commission are doing their homework, maybe they don't need quite that many. But again, we recommend it, even if you don't need it, we recommend that you go ahead and do it so that you could take your time and just learn new things. Just dig into that Title 53 and other things, and give you more time. I think the state set that up so that you're not rushed. They wanted you to have plenty of time and relax. Many people are working, got families and everything, so you don't really have a whole, lot of free time. So they wanted you to be able to take your time and not feel like you're rushed. But again, not all municipalities, government study commissions probably take that. But again, DCD doesn't monitor or anything like that. Who does it, who doesn't, how many people have done it in 2 months, and how many people have done it in 4 months. We don't do that. But the document that you receive, as long as it's, and I probably wouldn't personally get all tied up in that. I probably would just make sure that the document that I receive is a really good something. So, is the commission required to employ a consultant to help draft a charter? Again, it is advised, unless you're very, very sound in home rule and you've maybe worked with other communities, like on the ground with them, like our consultants. And we have consultants that we even recommend, to be honest, but that we can recommend. But if you, if you haven't, we recommend that. We recommend, and again, DCD have consultants that we actually can help you out and recommend for you. Many times the solicitor works along sometimes with the consultant, but then many times if you got a solicitor that is very knowledgeable, it may not be necessary. But again, we advise it. We mandate? No, we don't mandate that you get a consultant. that's again one of those things where we just advise. All right, we'll go real quick through the presentation. Many of the questions that I talked about, you'll see up here as well. The first, thank you. All right. Basically, what home rule is. We can turn to the next page, which basically tells what home rule is. And again, we're not really talking about, when they talk about home rule, who's the boss in your family or at home and things like that. We're talking about voters choosing to adopt, amend, or not to amend by referendum. Residents and voters' powers. That's what we're talking about. Basically, this is how the Government Study Commission is formed for a nonpartisan election. And again, it's the residents, it's the voters that want that. All right, we can go on to the next one. Okay, home rule. And again, you guys are so far past a lot of this, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't exclude these slides because I want you to get a clear understanding of what the process was, even though you guys are far past this, what the process was and how it came to be. Your charter came to be. Okay, we're looking at this as, when we talk about home rule, we're thinking about maybe boroughs, cities, and townships. Just think of them being flipped upside down, we like to think about. And as a practice and a concept. So we're turning your traditional municipalities order upside down and doing something different with it, focusing on the municipality itself. Again, not a cookie cutter style, but something that is formed specifically and custom specifically for this municipality. Home rule charter, also known as local constitution, signed, approved, and amended by voters. Okay, and again, home rule municipalities may exercise powers and perform functions not denied by the US Constitution, not denied by the PA Constitution, and there is that state law thing again. Specific restrictions, Act 62, not denied by that, laws that are uniform and applicable in every part of the Commonwealth. Home rule charter itself transfers, as we said, authority in the municipality affairs from state law to local charter adopted and amended by the voters. So again, here we are about that again with the voters. That's what they want. And with 4, okay, opportunity to shift governance from the state municipal code to local citizens. Shifting local government to the charter and the people, basically. It really gives voters the opportunity to tailor and customize, again, what works for this municipality, not your neighboring and not, a different county, but what's for your municipality. All right, 5, reasons for home rule. We went over some of these. Identify accountability, focus on political leadership, professional administration. All of these things are reasons for home rule. And many people have different reasons. Some people have the same reason. Again, write your own administrative code. And that is what we talked about with administrative code again. That I like to think of as the salt and pepper of the charter. The charter is here, and the bullets, I like to think of as the administrative code. And again, that is something that it can be easily amended, the administrative code. So that's why you really want to make sure the administrative code is detailed. It's okay to do that. Not so much in the charter itself, because the charter itself, once that gets in the charter, it's kind of there for a while. One township where the voters came out overwhelmingly for home rule, not for taxation or anything like that, but it was basically they wanted to customize. Again, like I said, and there's one out west, another one besides the one I was telling you about, customize their municipality to fit them. Fiscal controls, more accountability and flexibility. Administrative code, again, it adds substance. It's like the salt and pepper to the charter itself. It adds substance to the charter. We're going to go on to 6. Here we are at the limitations. This is a list of limitations. The home rule charter will not affect these things. It will not affect vehicle code, firearms and hunting regulations, private businesses, these things, regulation of utilities. No, the PUC does that. Public Utility Commission. So not the home rule charter. See all of these things in here, tort claims, civil damages, and no, home rule, taxation. The rates can change, but not new taxes. And again, the voters have a lot to say about that. So vehicle code won't change. Ethics law won't change. Eminent domain, it does not change with home rule. So there's a lot of things that sometimes are misconceptions when it comes to home rule. And sometimes when residents sometimes hear home rule, they think, oh my God, all these things are gonna, well, these right here. These are the things that your home rule charter will not change. When it comes to recall, like they had out there in Michigan and California, well, we don't even have that here in Pennsylvania. So I'm not sure what that's. Sunshine law won't change. So these are state laws that were regulation that will not change. Private business limitations. Home rule charter will not change that. And there it is down there, the clean streams, veterans preferences. Look at underneath the clean streams. There is that questioning in Sewage and Facilities Act. There's the Stormwater Management Act. That cannot change. But some of these can be tweaked. I'm trying to think which ones could actually be tweaked. Maybe something like the, again, the taxation. That's something where it could, the cap could be our Lord, your EIT, things like that. Those could be tweaked and things. So there's certain things that can be tweaked that but not changed. And these are mostly the ones right here that are not changed under limitations. So and that's basically what we talked about in some of the questions. Recycling and Waste Reduction Act. Again, that cannot be changed. Trying to think what else up there. Boundary change laws. Those are laws that are already set in place by the state of Pennsylvania. So your home rule charter will not change this up here. Cannot. Now that is one of the things, a lot of the things I said that we recommend and may say may, but this is one that they must not. The home rule charter must not infringe upon this up here. All right, 7. Forms of government, taxation. If there's no limitation spelled out in your home rule charter, the thing is about certain rates can be lifted and things. So that's why, again, I go back to don't put a bunch of stipulations in the home rule charter because it's difficult to make those changes. So it's best to put them in the administrative code so that you can have the flexibility to make certain changes, such as real estate tax, Act 511, which is the IT, transfer tax, local level, those sorts of things. Charters can state reasonable times to end budgets and start the budget, budget passed by ordinance and resolution. There's a lot of changes you can make as long as it's an administrative code. There's some things that belong in a charter and some things in administrative code, which sometimes you may say, okay, we're going to try this, and then we want to switch it back. Well, it's going to be really difficult to switch back and forth once it's in a charter. But when it's an administrative code, there's more flexibility with it. So when it's just, again, by ordinance only. Operations procedures, your meetings. You could just change, that could be an administrative code. You just decide what you want to do. Public hearings, records, operation and rules, all of these things. You list them in your charter, but in the administrative code, you would be more specific on these things. And again, it allows changes. 8, home rule municipalities. Here we are. It says 79 up there, but again, it's kind of it's becoming pretty moving thing here with home rule. We have 81. We have 81 in 7 counties. And again, there we are out there in the West again with Allegheny. It was really, they have quite a bit out there. We have Delaware, Erie, Lackawanna, Lehigh, Luzerne. And this law was enacted in 1972, as you see. So home rule has been around a little bit. And again, we at DCD, we kind of study different home rule charters and kind of see where it difference. And that's what also we want the Home Rule Commission study to do, is to study other charters and things. And then you kind of get, okay, well, we see here and see that. And then you know some things that you want and some that you, oh no, we're going to stay away from that in ours. So you learn so much by taking that time to actually study it. Here we go again. Sample home rule municipality structure. This is just a sample of structure. Where the mayor elected independently as a member of council, mayor presides as president of council. You know, here, this is just an example. That's all. I'm sure you guys already have this figured out. 10, and we're there again. Here is another sample of a structure. We go to 11, again. Mayor position eliminated. Council appoints manager. What I want to say about the appointments and things, under when, I think it's 1 year after the drafting of the charter, maybe, where actually the our elections has to line up with it. Either way, when you go to actually, you know, when the say the treasurer or something, or the secretary, when you want, okay, we want to end their job is going to be eliminated. You can put in your charter, this position will change on this date, and this position and that position will change, will flip on this date. You can customize your charter so that, you know, everybody just doesn't disappear after, you know, after a certain date. You can customize it the way you want to customize it. There is no rule on that. As long as you have it in your charter, you customize and say, okay, well, this all but the manager will end, and then all but the secretary, and the secretary's date will end here, here, and here. That kind of thing. So again, when we talk about home rule, customize your charter and your administrative code for this municipality. Maybe you don't want everybody to just disappear at the same time. Maybe you want to keep or a little longer this one or that one. It's all up to you. Taxation on page 12. Ability to adopt a new taxation system. customize. Again, taxes you can even customize to fit your municipality. You can offer relief for the aging population with EIT. Again, it would tax the those that are working and not the aging population with EIT. And then it's such a small amount taken out over a period of years, over a period throughout the year, you don't really miss it that much. But at least it won't be taxing the aging population. Ability to change taxation system to better meet the needs of the people. Spelled out in the municipal code, home rule does not affect school districts. Those taxes would remain the same. Again, I'll say it again. Home rule does not affect school district. Those taxes remain the same. And again, that is one of those laws that are set in place, one of the limitations that we talked about. And again, study your municipal code so that you'll know what is legal, what is not legal. Know it as the Government Study Commission, know it as council, know it as residents. Study Title 53. Ask someone else, look it up, Google, any of that stuff to familiarize yourself. And again, I always advise over and over again to download our home rule book right here. Download it, go on DCD website and look for it. Read it, read it, read it, read it, read it. In here has so much information. And I think it's 104 pages, but it starts from Table of Contents, Home Rule for Pennsylvania Local Governments, Meaning of the Home Rule, Development of Home Rule, Citizens Involvement, Placing the Government Study Commission questions on the ballot. It goes on down to operations, finances, work schedule, committees, meetings, final report, discharge of commission. It goes on down, drafting the Home Rule Charter, basic nature of the charter, basic charter components, governing body, fiscal procedures, citizen participation. It goes on and reads so much. So we want you to go on DCD's website and download that. It goes all the way to adopting and amending and repealing. So if you got questions regarding adopting, amending, and repealing a charter, it is in our publication. I sound like I'm getting paid to just push the publication down. It is on page 45, 47, 49, and 52, all about adopting, amending, and repealing the charter. So there's so much in our publication that is very, very helpful to everyone, not just the Government Study Commission, but to everyone here in the municipality. Again, here's the taxation limits we were talking about, current limited by the Pennsylvania legislation. All right, 13. Forming a Government Study Commission. Referendum is placed on the ballot. See, you guys already are past this, but we just wanted to throw it in for you so that you'll see how all of this came about, and at least how all of this should have come about if it hadn't come this way. But either way, you don't need to backtrack. You're where you're at, and here's how you got to your results. Yeah. All about educating yourself again, educating the public and transparency. I can't stress that enough. I can't stress enough about educating the public. Educate the public, educate the public. You may be familiar, but we want you to educate, put it on your website, all of those things. Whatever you have to do, hold special meetings, whatever you have to do to keep the public educated on what's going on. It really assures transparency. It really, really does. And what really helps everyone here is if you're educated, if you have read the municipal act from the state, and if you have read our home rule publication, if you have studied other forms of other home rule communities, shall I say, in your own form of government. That's what really helps and makes, I think, things go really smooth. I think when things go hooray is when people don't understand. That's usually the case where we found at some communities where when the people didn't understand, they don't know what's going on. They didn't know what was going on. So therefore, things got twisted and false information was thrown out there, and everyone was fearful, and it's almost like we get calls at DCD where it's almost like some aliens or something are taking over the township or something, and it's not that difficult. It's just that you study and educate yourself, then I think you'll be fine. Within 10 days of the certification of elections, Government Study Commission members must take the oath. Again, this is all things that you guys have already went through. We'll go on to 15. The municipality shall be governed under the provisions of the plan from the first Monday in January following the municipal election occurring after the next succeeding primary elections, except as provided in the section 2924C. So here, usually it's a year before it becomes actually in effect. And again, here's where I talked about when it comes to customizing your charter and your admin code so that everything just doesn't have to, you can customize when things are finished, when things are required, and all of that. You don't have to allow the current offices to finish their term. It's not really required, but you can, that kind of thing, but again, if you put those in when it comes to in your charter about, okay, all but this and all but that, or this date, that date, it's okay to put those things in. But either way, you want a smooth transition, but you can customize it so that it can be things will be smooth. 16. Here we go again. These are public. Here's where you can find this publication, the Home Rule Resources and Information. So if you can write all of this down, there's our number. dced.pa.gov is where you would find this. And you look under publications, you will see this document under there. Other home rule municipalities, again, that's where you would look, and they're so helpful. And usually they're just, and if you actually talk to them, they're so happy to help you out and give you information. PML, Home Rule Advocacy Committee, colleges and universities. Those are all resources of where you can find as much information as possible. And again, you will utilize your solicitor when it comes to legal questions and things. If you contact DCED, you're probably not going to get any legal when it comes to legal advice. Because why? Because they tell us, hey, look, you guys aren't attorneys. Don't give out legal advice. And we don't. When I worked in floodplain management for when I first came to DCD, left PennDOT and came to DCD, I was assistant to the state NFIP coordinator. And I was constantly told, look, you are not an engineer. So therefore, I could tell certain things when it comes to boundaries and things, but I was not an engineer. And they made it clear and let me know that I should not certain things, leave up to the engineer and stay in your own lane. So that's the way we are at DCD when it comes to legal things. I'm able to email you Title 53 state laws. I'm able to email you what's in our publications, things like that. But when it comes to actual legal advice, that's where the solicitor comes in at. That's where it comes in, specifically for the municipality itself. But again, I say study the publications, study the home rule municipalities that are in the area. Study the home rule municipalities that are across the state, and you'll see where they vary so much. You'll see where they vary so much. And again, transparency, 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 transparency. And I find that when even myself, when I was reading our publication, there's a lot of things that I did not know. But when I went through the publication, I was like, wow, okay, it's a lot of things that I wasn't sure about. And then when I looked in Title 53, the state code law that governs municipalities in Pennsylvania, there was an overwhelmingly amount of information in that, because those are state laws that let you know right there, it cannot be tweaked, they cannot be changed under any circumstances, no matter whether you're, home rule or not home rule. There's certain things that can be seen as the limitations up there. Those also, whether you're home rule or if you're not home rule, those are just set in stone where you can't change those. Eminent domain and all of those things like that, you just can't change them. But it's good to familiarize yourself and know what can be changed, what can't be changed, and also where your resources are, so that if you do bring something up to someone, you say, here it is written here. And that's the best way, is to be able to, when you're trying to make a point, the best way to do it is to have some document in your hand and say, hey, look, right here is where it says this and where it says that. Now, I'm not talking about, again, where it says we recommend, but certain things like limitations are, again, the title there that governs municipalities, those things are in stone. And when you have that information in those resources, then you're able to bring the questions up, and then you'll get answers. And maybe it's something that slipped past. No municipality is perfect. I haven't seen any, and I'm into my just shy of 33 years with the Commonwealth. And I have not met yet a municipality that did not make some sort of a mistake. See? So therefore, and it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. The main thing is correct them and keep it moving. Correct the mistakes and keep moving. And then when you're transparent about things, and the more you educate yourself, when you make a mistake, you say, okay, well, we're going to correct this, and we're going to get it right. And then you just keep moving. But the main thing is communicate with the public, because if the residents find the mistake before you do, and that's always a problem. So that's why you educate yourself. You make a mistake, then you say, hey, look, we made a mistake here, so now we're going to amend this, and we're going to get this right. And I think the public and residents and the municipalities are usually a little bit more receptive, rather than just rushing over and act like it never exists. So, but again, here's all of your resources here. And again, if you need me to email you, if you need me to email you this, then that's fine too. My email is FR Chapman. First two initials of my first name, which is Fred, FR, and my full last name, Chapman, CHAPMAN. Not anyone on there. Not anyone on there. Yeah. Yes, FR, those are all other regions. So, but it's frchapman@pa.gov. And if you email me, and if you want me to email your publication because you couldn't find it or something, I'd be happy to do that. If you just can't find the title that I was speaking of and things that govern this municipality, I'll email you the portion that I spoke of today. Again, not being an attorney, I haven't read all of that stuff. But if there's something specific that we go out and talk about or something, then we just look in there and we pull out the clip and the portion that relates to what we're talking about, because it's, as you know, it's pages and pages of stuff. But again, your solicitor up here, it will be very helpful with most of this information. And when it comes to your the drafting of the charter, again, If you don't have a consultant, it is something that we do advise. And again, DCD, actually, we have a program, the Strategic Management Planning Program, that the municipality itself would have to apply for. And that can help cut the costs because up to 50%, it's up to 50% match. So if you hire this consultant, up to 50% match, DCD will pay. It's a little bit more to it, but if that's something you're interested in, the Strategic Management Planning Program, that is something that I can also email or come and talk to you about. We call it STAMP. But through that, we many municipalities are able to hire consultants and things like that. But again, that's not a requirement. You don't have to, hire a consultant to draft your charter. All right, again, well, thank you very much for having me here. It's my first time here, surprisingly. But again, you have my email, frchapman@pa.gov. Please provide your phone number also, because if there's something that I need to elaborate on or something, at least I have your phone number and I can say, okay, well, let me just actually call them rather than send them an email. So if you happen to email me, provide your phone number and let me know in your email what you actually want, and then I could be prepared and I will actually give you a call. But if it's something by email, like a publication or something, I'll be happy to email that to you. You don't have to go and search for it. And also, if there is any of these that you have trouble finding or something, I probably could email you more information about them and exactly where to look and find some of the resources. All right. Well, thank you again very much for having me, Jen. I really appreciate it. And it's great seeing your smiling faces, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And not to steal your thunder, but in case you visit our website, we also have links to the home rule handbook. Pardon my voice. I was at the Eagles game on Sunday, so I'm still recovering. We have the Pennsylvania home rule handbook there. We have the Title 53. We have the current Class 2 township code on our website as well. So, and we also have samples of other municipal home rule charters. Norristown's, Horsham's, and Plymouth Townships is up there. So,
And I have a few extras I'm going to leave here.
yeah.
for you guys.
Thank you so much, Brett.
Thank you.
Safe travels home. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it.
Next on the agenda is responses to the January 18th public comment. I think it's important for elected officials to engage the public, especially in an office like this, where we only have the power of recommendation. Upon review of the last meeting, there are a few public comments that I don't think were addressed adequately. I made a mistake when reading rates at the last meeting. Aqua's current sewer rates are $1,058 a year, which is a $130 error in my favor and brings PFM's error to $180. The error in both the Aqua rates and the American Water rates are enough to break PFM's analysis if applied to NextEra. As with American Water, Aqua has a significant advantage in operational qualities compared to NextEra, and yet their current rates are the same as what NextEra projected their rates would be in 10 years. The Public Utility Commission sets these rates using the same process. I'm of the opinion that it should be assumed that NextEra will have higher rates than the established investor-owned utilities. Chris Casimir asked for an analysis of the sewer sale and PFM. I think I covered some of that verbally, but I will be glad to set up some slides for the next meeting. Shannon Main commented that she felt we should have an 18-month study because we approved the budget. To be clear, that budget was developed with our current schedule in mind. If we do an 18-month study, we would have to go back to the Board of Supervisors to adjust. Studies of municipalities our size have come in around $50,000. And there's a weird accounting thing that happens when government study commissions share their solicitor services with the township. Those solicitor hours don't appear on the study commission's budget. The budget is a function of the length of the study, and this study's budget seems to be on the cheap end of government studies, inclusive of solicitor hours. Mike Bain asked me who wrote the charter. It was me physically sitting at my computer, but to elaborate the drafting process. After I wrote the draft and sent it over to our solicitors for a review, Tina, Jen, and I then met with our solicitors to go over change requests and to make sure the charter legally did what we thought it would do. Now that the entire commission has approved preparing a charter, feedback on the draft is accepted at public meetings. In the literal sense, I am drafting charter. In the philosophical sense, everyone in Towamencin is drafting the charter. Nancy Becker commented that Norristown and Towamencin are incomparable because of Norristown's mayor's corruption. Towamencin had a similarly big civic event around the same time, and we got a physical monument out of it. I came across an article in the Reporter by Monica Thompson. It was published on August 15th, 2002, and it was titled "Residents Mobilize Opposition." There was a citizens group created in Towamencin in response to the Bridge to Nowhere situation. Quote, "The group started to form a plan to remove Supervisor Chairman Ted Doran and Supervisors Michael Beckert and Rich Lanning from office." The article would go on to describe the financial misdealings of our township manager at the time, John Granger. While the legal consequences of the Norristown and Towamencin situation in the early aughts weren't the same, the political consequences were strikingly similar. If I'm not mistaken, both the Norristown Council and the Towamencin Board of Supervisors had full turnover around the same time. Both municipalities changed their policies around the executive branch of the government. Norristown removed the mayor position from their charter. Towamencin changed some procedures around authorizing the township manager to move money. And 2 decades later, both municipalities, despite having governing bodies that are nominally distinct from the early aughts, have chosen to approve a sewer sale, and both Norristown and Towamencin residents responded with an initiative option that was available to them. Seems similar enough to me. I came across that article in a blog called Chester County Ramblings. Exeter Township in Chester County sold their sewer system to American Water. Their manager at the time, John Granger, was the mouthpiece used to justify their sale. The Exeter PUC protest focuses quite a bit on John Granger's time in Towamencin. I find it fascinating that there are at least 2 former Towamencin employees from the Bridge to Nowhere era that have pushed sewer sales as managers in other townships, John Granger and Dan Kerr. And next on the agenda is open public comment. Would anyone like to give public comment?
Shannon Main, Towamencin taxpayer. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things because I thought that we were going to be addressing questions per all the communications to Fred directly. So I guess we can just email those questions over to him, or can anybody explain why we can't address questions to him?
Fred had emailed me actually yesterday and said that he had received questions from both the commission as well as the supervisors and was hopeful that he would be able to address all of those questions through his presentation, which I think he did, and said that he would be more than happy to take, you can email him questions. He'll take them then. He preferred not to do them here.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So just a couple of things I wanted to point out because I have read the Home Rule Handbook at least a dozen times. Kofi and I have discussed it in length when we worked the polls for 5 hours together on election day. And it was enacted, like he said, in 1972. So in 1972 to 1975, for 3 years, 140 government study ballot questions were put on ballots. So since then, from 1972 all the way down to 2002, it went from 140 government study questions on a ballot. 3 years later, 18, 3 years later, 22, and it quickly diminished. From 1999 to 2002, there was only 4 government study questions on a ballot in Pennsylvania. This is right out of the Home Rule Handbook, page 5 of the Home Rule Handbook. Also, the budget that was presented to the supervisors, the data from the budget went back to the 1980s. There's no data that can really be found since the 1980s because of the quickly diminished ballot questions that are not happening. I believe, just from some publications that I read, that in 1972, when this was enacted, people thought it was going to be a great idea to go to home rule. That's why the very first 3 years, 140 ballot questions were added. And then since then, they realized that it actually is not a good option for the townships. Also, I just wanted to point out that I had some questions asked to me and some comments that Kofi made to some taxpayers. He said, as it currently is written, the charter ties all of the current class 2 township codes by default and bans the sewer sale and adds referendum options. So people were asking me, well, aren't we going to stay a class 2 township? We're not going to stay a class 2 township. We are going to be changing to home rule. And what that's going to do is put referendum. So if we have 15,000 registered voters, you would need 10%, but they got 15%. So 2,000 voters would have to sign a petition to add referendum to change things in this charter. So really, if this goes through in May and in November comes, all you would need is 1,500 people out of 15,000 to sign a petition to get referendums on the ballot. So really, they could have 7, 10, 20 questions on a ballot that they'd have to publish 30 days prior to election in the newspaper. So we would have the rest of us 13,500 registered voters would have 30 days to review all of the questions and come up with an answer, yes or no, to the ballot questions. Also in the home rule handbook, it does state here that one township in Franklin City, 23 paragraphs were amended into a single proposed vote. Also, 15 separate questions were placed on the ballot in Lehigh County over 3 election periods. So that would mean the citizens and voters of Towamencin Township could possibly have in over 3 elections, 15 different questions to review, study, and come up with an accurate answer for that can be changing the form of government of our Towamencin Township. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to give public comment?
Mike Main, Towamencin resident. I had some questions for him as well, but I guess we'll just move on. I'm going to try and tie some of them into this. Is it the solicitor's recommendation to go against Mr. Chapman's and the DCED's strong recommendation, the word that he used, to use the 9 months for the study before drafting the charter? This commission's study took less than 2 before the charter was drafted.
My office doesn't make a recommendation as to how many months should or should not be spent on studying the topic that's in front of the commission. The commission continues to study the form of government as well as the alternatives. What we were asked was whether or not the study that they are performing is compliant with what's required by the statute, and it is.
On page 15 of the Home Rule Handbook is the section called works. Sorry, that is the question for. Okay, Home Rule Handbook, page 3 says the Home Rule Law also contains restrictions on the exercise of Home Rule powers in certain subject areas. Home Rule municipalities are restricted to the powers set in the state and law. In addition, Home Rule municipalities are subject to uniform state laws applicable in every part of the Commonwealth. Page 29 states the study commission should avoid obvious conflicts with overriding constitutional and statutory provisions. Many of these issues will arise and be dealt with during the commission study. Much of this can be done through the exercise of common sense and seeking good advice. Page 12, the study commissioner should consider engaging the services of local government and legal experts early in their deliberations. A consultant can advise on what a sound charter should contain and also on the pace and schedule of work for the commission if recommendations are to be made before the statutory deadline. Will the solicitor seek to help and work with the DCED experts that Mr. Chapman said was available?
If it becomes necessary, we'll certainly work with DCED, but so far we've been just reviewing the documents and it's a fairly straightforward document so far.
This government study has asked Towamencin Township to retain the services of Rudolph Clark. They have legal obligation to protect the interest of the township and the residents. Is it in the opinion of Rudolph Clark that this charter draft conforms with the uniform laws across the state and does not conflict with current state laws?
So we reviewed the initial draft and the answer to that question would be yes. We are in receipt of the subsequent draft and that's currently under review in my office. But in glancing, in looking through it, it looks like it's compliant.
This is a quote from the article the reporter published of remarks at the last meeting. Osai then asked Mike Clark, solicitor for the study commission, to
30
give his
seconds, please.
opinion, and then the attorney did so. Ultimately, any challenge will end up in Pennsylvania courts and they have the final say, but we believe this has a strong chance of withstanding a challenge and preventing the township from selling its public sanitary sewer system to Next Era or another non-government entity, he said. Excuse me. Has your law firm ever represented a municipality where their newly drafted home rule charter was challenged in court?
It has not been done, to my knowledge, in this part of the state, in many years. So no. But we do represent municipalities with home rule charters. And again, we are very familiar with the law and we've reviewed all the documents.
But it's never been your office, your firm has never,
I'm not aware of this issue ever having been litigated in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
what solicitor would be responsible to represent Towamencin when Pennsylvania courts challenges charter?
I don't think the Pennsylvania courts would challenge the charter. I think the Pennsylvania courts would make the determination as to whether or not the charter is valid, and then if there's a subsequent challenge. It depends on what the nature of a challenge was, who was bringing the challenge. So that's something that's to be determined. If there is a lawsuit.
So after the charter is voted on, assuming that the vote is yes, and then it would be challenged in the courts. Do you know what the solicitor would be that would represent Towamencin? Would it be your firm?
Well,
Rudolph Clark?
again, there's a lot of factors at play. So if the township is the one that's filing the challenge, then, I would imagine that Mr. Iannozzi would represent the township in that litigation, but I'm not, it's hard to answer the question without knowing what litigation we're talking about.
Have you or any member of the government study had any discussion with them about the charter?
I've spoken to Mr. Iannozzi and the commission members can let you know about their conversations with the board, but I do believe they've been to meetings.
Well, how did your law
Should we
firm?
finish one more question and then let others have public comment? And
Well,
come
no,
back
we
at the
didn't
end?
have quite time to ask him questions as you guys put
You
them.
can email Fred questions. He's offered, he gave his email. You're welcome to email him any questions.
We have a 3-minute public comment limit, but you'll be allowed to go again at the end.
How did your law firm come to the decision that when challenged in court, this has a strong case of withstanding a challenge if you most likely won't be the ones litigating it and you've never done it before?
I didn't say that we would not be the ones litigating it, but we base that on our legal expertise and our familiarity with the case law and the applicable statutes.
How much do you estimate that the legal fees for a challenge in the Pennsylvania court, then appellate court, and finally the PA Supreme Court could cost the township?
It would be impossible for me to say that.
Well, I believe that we should get an estimate of those costs going into it now that we know that there's a likely possibility that this is going to be challenged. We should understand what those costs are to the township and the taxpayers moving forward before we decide to complete the charter or vote on it. So can we get an estimate of that? And when would that estimate be complete?
I do not have an estimate, and it would be foolish for me to try to estimate how much cost would be involved in litigation that is undefined. We don't know what the parties are. We don't know where the venue would be. We don't know.
Could
what
it
the
be
argument-
tens of thousands?
Again, I'm not going to, there's no way for me to estimate that.
So could it possibly be tens of thousands?
Sir, I'm not going to answer the question.
You're not
I
gonna,
don't have a way to answer the question.
so you're not answering the question, there's no comment? You couldn't estimate how much it might
I
cost
cannot.
to, we're gonna go blindly into it without knowing what the cost would be? If the charter withstands all of these court battles and successfully
Could you let
stops the
others
sewer sale,
Make public
could
comment,
Towamencin
please.
Township be sued by NextEra? And could that potentially cost the township?
Please, your 3 minutes are up. Please let someone else make.
I
public comment.
believe this is much more important than,
We have a public comment rule. Please let others speak. Go ahead, Rich.
Thank you. I will continue where the previous
Very
commenter.
close to the mic, please, and state
All
your
right.
name.
I had very similar questions to the previous commenter. Mine were, will you publish a written legal opinion as to how and under what statutes you think this will be successful?
I'm sorry, you're asking us to publish an opinion?
Well, we have heard from the solicitor here that you think it will withstand a public challenge.
Correct?
Okay, I would like to read why you think that's the case, first of all. And then secondly, inferring that this commission may proceed despite countermanding legal evidence, what is likely to be the cost? I have done a little bit of personal research, and this thing could run 5 to 6, maybe even 7 figures, depending on how many people get involved. And I, for one, don't think the township should be putting ourselves on the hook for that kind of money over this issue. So we need clarification of that. Okay, we need clarification of what could this happen. Now, Mr. Chapman agreed that it was unlikely that Home Rule was going to be able to reverse this formal contract. I'm not an attorney, but I do know a little bit about contracts, having run a business. And when you sign a contract, you are committed. And with all due respect to the comment about Baltimore's charter, Towamencin is not Baltimore. So I don't think that the comparison is accurate. So I think we need a very detailed explanation of what's going to be involved and how much it's likely to cost, because we could end up spending that kind of money and end up with a court mandated sale anyway. And so we need to be educated, as Mr. Chapman has indicated, about those things, and it needs to be in writing. That's the thing that I have been advocating for. And I find it interesting that Mr. Chapman was saying a number of times that transparency and a formal report are recommended by DCED. And that's the thing that I've been asking for, but has not materialized. And I think it needs to. I also think it behooves the commission to explore what NextEra might be doing in terms of financing this purchase. There's a recently passed federal infrastructure initiative.
30 seconds, please.
Okay, that may affect how they're going to finance this. There's a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars available in grants to help particularly small townships fund sewage treatment facilities. Does the commission know whether NextEra is planning to avail themselves of that? That would change the entire financial analysis of this. Or do you know if our form of government would affect what we could qualify for directly, even if we manage to keep the sale? Those are the kind of critical issues that I think this commission needs to take the time to evaluate and put down in writing for people to review, because to not do that avoids or runs counter to the transparency that you are all fond of saying you're trying to do. Because what you say in a slide deck or in your personal conversations is one thing, putting it in writing is another. And as now duly elected representatives, government representatives, you have an obligation to the citizenry to put what you think in writing so that we can all evaluate it. We got 48 hours to evaluate version 2 of this draft home rule charter. That is totally inadequate. And I think you need to do a better job.
So just two responses. If we send a charter to the County Board of Elections, we do have to publish a written report. And we did budget to send that report out to every resident.
Okay, but that, I understand.
So we
that, but
haven't finished the study, to be clear, is what I'm saying.
Okay, but we need time to evaluate it.
Sure. And
And 48 hours is not enough if that's what we get. I'm not saying that's what you're going to give
we
us.
did not send it to the county, so it's not the final version yet.
Okay.
So, combined with these meetings and putting the charter on the website, we still have time to evaluate this process. Would anyone else like to give a public comment?
Good evening. Rich Marino, Boyd Avenue, Towamencin resident. My question just has to do with the taxation portion of the proposed charter. You had mentioned last session, a land use tax. Is that something still on the table?
I just mentioned it as a point of information that things that happen in other charters, but as our charter is currently written, it's the same types of taxes that Class 2 townships can have.
Okay, I think you know from my comments over the course of this, that this was a financial decision. And in looking at it, assuming that you're going to be successful, I mean, I think you have to plan in doing your work, you have to plan that you're going to succeed. The land use tax, I had some issues with. We still have 2 working farms in the township that I fear for what that could do to them and their ability to transfer those farms down to their families beyond them. So I did have some reservations about that, and I think that's something that needs to be flushed out and presented. In looking, you guys attend the meetings a lot. You hear me sit up there and read that Public Works report once a month. It's the longest report that I think any of us read. Takes me a good 10+ minutes to go through it. Unfortunately, it's not getting any shorter. But we do have a lot of infrastructure needs, necessities coming our way to replace some of the aging infrastructure we have. I voted for this because I felt that this would help, in addition to retiring the debt, help us with those financial responsibilities we have. Other than property taxes, that's the only way we have to raise revenue at this point. And then we also have sewer rates. Have you considered anything with the earned income tax?
As of now, the thinking between this commission is we leave any financial discussions to the amendment process.
I'm sorry.
The thinking of the commission is we'd leave any financial discussions to the amendment process. We've heard a lot of feedback saying they don't want to change taxes, so we left it the same.
So you're not gonna change the EIT or add a land use tax provision in there?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Bob DiDomizio, Towamencin resident. Before you hit the timer, I just want to ask a question. Are these comments not towards the home rule, in other words, to this, or is this going to be a separate comment?
Just anything on the commission, so either the draft or anything else that the commission.
Okay, we haven't talked about this at the meeting, so I didn't want to jump ahead and use up my time on comments they're all having to do. So is this going to be talked about, or, right?
We didn't read it out, but we did have that slide deck with the description, so we have talked about it. So if you want to comment on it now, that'd be fine.
Well, I don't know what you're going to say, so I'm not sure what the comment is.
So we already talked about it, is what I'm saying.
This is the time for public comment. So if you have public comment on that or any other item, this is the time.
We haven't done anything with it yet, so I don't have to comment on. Okay. It's not self-explanatory, in other words. Well, you're gonna have to jam as much as I can in here, but first of all, if this is being presented as a draft, it doesn't say the word draft. Secondly, was this drafted under the Rules of Sunshine Act? I don't recall this being advertised and created during an open passage meeting. So this would have to have been advertised and created in the public. I'm just a comment, not a question. Please. You can answer it on your own, not on my time. But this is not representative of an actual properly constructed document. I call into question the depth under which we expect to see this. Now, we know the stated purpose has expanded a bit. And people, and I appreciate very much you brought the DCD people out here to talk about this. But we're going to hammer home the fact that the commission is charged with doing a better job. The commission is charged with doing a thorough review. That means line by line, every item, yes, no, keep it, don't keep it. It's in the regulations. It's in the DCD handbook here. What replaces what, line by line. You're very vague in the things that you want to change. If this is representative of what you intend to put on the ballot as a referendum, is solely short of what we expect. Just a couple items under C. Should be no preconceived notions. You came in with preconceived notions about what you wanted to accomplish. I don't mind that you have things that you want to look at, but you only have one specific thing. It comes in, what is the efficiency and responsibility of the existing system? I'm not seeing any discussion about that. I'm blowing through here as quickly as I can. The Sunshine Law. You don't get to choose. Only time you can apply the Sunshine Law is when it has to do with specific items. Nothing has been defined as that. Is why you can work on this without the Sunshine Law. This is done through public examination and public discourse. You're supposed to provide the widest possible public information and discussion on the purpose and progress of the work. That is under Sunshine Law. That's not being done here. Public hearings on a tentative draft ought to be held by about the 12th month. I know that may not be consistent in this point, but I think you're rushing things. You have 18 months to create this. You want to push it in 12. I think you want to push it in time for the next election. That's what I think. But if you want any kind of, not only is this is just a miscarriage of purpose of this committee. It makes
30
a
seconds,
mockery of the
please.
committee. The next item there, it gives you, if you went by the same regulations, same rule book that Mr. Chapman brought to you, there are several items, and there's 7 items. Fourth one down the list is drafting a report. You're nowhere near that point. But yet you want to push it down. Okay, yes, these are comments. These are not questions. I don't expect to get any response back. It's hard to jam so much into this time. If somebody else, and I reserve the right to, if somebody else wants to give me their time, they can. But the report should include the text of the question as specified to be placed on the ballot.
You give time for someone else, please.
You have to tell us exactly what's going to put on there. This doesn't tell you exact. You go back to your statement of purpose, it's changed. It needs to be a complete plan. So 2 additional elements in the final report, the most important things. The final report to contain complete plans as recommended and financial statement. Keep skipping around that. Financial statement is just as important as what this charter plan.
Could you let someone else
is.
speak, please?
I'm sorry, you're saying something?
Could you let someone else speak, please?
No,
We have a 3-minute public comment rule.
yeah. I've heard other people go a lot more than 3 minutes. But I will, I'm sorry. Why don't you get up there? If you want, they need an extra person up there. Do you want to join them? They need a 7th person, don't you? I didn't invite any comment from the audience. Oh, yeah. Well, I've heard you go 10 minutes at a time. So Yeah, so the point is, I'm not disrespecting you folks. I want you to know that. I'm just saying, it's hard for me to take enough breath to do all that, but thank you for the time.
Thank you.
And just to respond to some of the comments, all of the commission has complied with the Sunshine Act on all requirements. There has been no official action or deliberation taken outside the public forum.
Hi, my name is Paul Andrews, Valley View Way. I've been a Towamencin resident for 10 years now and probably will be for another 20 or 30 years. I just want to say, during the last election season, the note slate was very clear about what items they wanted to change and what they wanted to leave the same. And they were also very clear about the timeline. They wanted to forbid the sale of the sewer system and they wanted to add a referendum. And the time frame was to get something to the voters before the primary this spring, because the sale is winding its way through the PUC process and time is of the essence. Those things were clear. I heard that stated numerous times when members who were at the meetings. I heard it when they were campaigning it. I saw that in mailers. They've been very clear and precise about what they wanted to change and what they didn't want to change. They wanted to change those two items and not a whole lot else. That's what we're seeing out of this draft. There are still several months before the primary. We can comment on it. We can talk about it. We can change things. And then during the primary, you have a chance to vote on that. Everybody's going to get a chance to say yes or no to this, what is now a draft. If Towamencin had had a referendum, which we don't have, they're trying to add that. If we had had a referendum last year, we wouldn't be here right now. This is a boring meeting. We wouldn't be here talking about this. We could have put this to a referendum and said yes or no as citizens to the sewer sale. Given the results of the election in the fall, which was 60-40, basically in favor of the Government Study Commission, that probably would have failed. As someone who spoke at one of the other meetings in front of the Board of Supervisors, we're opposed to the sewer sale for a couple of reasons. First of all, is local control and accountability. Obviously, right now we have control of the sewer. We can talk about management. We can talk about maintenance and any tax or rate increases that would have to happen. If the sale goes through and NextEra takes over, how much accountability do we have as citizens? Zero. They can raise the rates by going through the PUC. They can do maintenance or upgrades or not. If we don't like it, tough luck. We get zero say. We also don't like it because it's not fiscally responsible. $115 million is what they bid. Franconia wanted to form a regional authority and they wanted to bid $23 million. Why do you think NextEra bid $115 million, more than 4 times as much? It's because Act 12 allows the PUC to let them make that money back. Where do they get that money? Ratepayers. That's us. I hear a lot of concern about legal bills here, but I don't hear any concern from some of these residents about how our rates are going to go up. If they take as much rate as they are allowed to via the PUC, our rates could go over $2,000 a year. If I'm here in this township for the next 30 years, that's $60,000 for me and my family. So it's fiscally irresponsible to let go of our community-owned essential utility and give it to a for-profit company who would then have a monopoly over it forever. I want to thank the commission and good luck.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Christian Fusco. I'm a 10-year Towamencin resident, at least as of March, I will be. My statement was almost word for word, just said right before me. So I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. It's been a little bit of a long meeting. First, I want to thank the commission. I want to thank you for giving your time to do this on behalf of this community. I think it's worth restating that this commission is a referendum on the sewer sale. That's the way the voters understood it. That was the way this group promoted it when they were trying to get support in the community for this process to be held. I am finding this process to be rather transparent. In listening to the comments from the gentleman tonight, the ideal situation would certainly be to have 9 months, 12 months, 18 months to study this issue. But ironically, that would actually fly in the face of the purpose of this process as it has been understood by the community. Devoid of context, the clock is ticking, right? There is an imminent sale, and we want to be able to have a voice as citizens in this community, as residents in this community, and taxpayers in this community to weigh in. I find this process fascinating. You know, we live in a time where we're continually accusing each other of being socialists or fascists. I think this process is demonstrating that we very much still live in a democracy, right? We're a very large company with a whole lot of money and a lot of clout and influence in an industry with a lot of clout and influence is trying to buy up municipal services across the state. You are just our neighbors. You are not lobbyists. You are not professionals in understanding, you know, the ins and outs of these municipal systems. You are just people who decided not to give up on this fight. And you're doing it on behalf of the vast majority of members of this community, the vast majority. As it had been said, if this had been on the ballot, specifically, not the commission, but the sewer sale, it would have failed miserably. And regardless of what your public comment is here tonight and where you stand on this issue, you know that's the truth. And what I see is citizens, residents pushing back on big interests that want to take from us. So I thank you for the time you're putting in on my behalf and on my kids' behalf and on everybody else's behalf, even whether or not they agree with you or not. As concerned as we are about lawsuits, and we'll
30
wrap
seconds,
up
please.
in just 1 second. Lawsuits, and we're going to have a 24% tax increase this year. Our sewer rates could likely triple, right? So what are we talking about? Hypothetical lawsuits that may or may not happen and what they would cost. That's silly in the context of everything that's been happening this past year within this township. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah. We're past 9. Would anyone new like to give a public comment?
Oh, okay. Up at you. All right, James Collins, Towamencin Township resident. I'm gonna make this quick and dirty because the young man said that I was up here for 10 minutes and over. I'm not gonna be, because of the limitation that I have, pardon me if what I say seems a little curt, but what we have here is a math problem. It's not a legal problem. Somebody's coming into our township and is going to give us $115 million. We take in $5 million a year. It would take 23 years, 23 times 5 will be 115. It would take 23 years for them to be able to equal the money that they're investing into the township if they just ran the number in the sewer the way they do now. It'd be ridiculous for us to stand here and say that our sewer rates are not going to change. What's the difference? If our rates do go up because we have it, or our taxes go up, we keep the sewer, our taxes go up a little bit so that we can take care of the jobs, we can take care of the infrastructure that we need to take care of. That's money that's going to stay in our community, as opposed to us giving money to NextEra, who's going to take our money and our resources down to Florida. That's the difference. It's a math problem. When we stand here and talk to the solicitor and ask questions, Guys, we're not lawyers. Unless you're an attorney, it's hard for us to understand the law and the legal process. So that's why we talk to solicitors. That's why we talk to attorneys. Even people who went for nope and were on that side and would question the township solicitor and what his position was on the law, I would chuckle to myself. He's a lawyer. He's been to law school. He knows what the law is. She knows what the law is. If you're going to ask her and start berating her with questions about what it's going to cost, she has no idea what it's going to cost. Why doesn't she know? She doesn't know who's going to sue us, what they're going to sue us for, how far they're going to go, what court we're going to stand in front of, and all these other factors that she would have to know for her to be able to give an intelligent answer and an intelligent assessment on what the cost would be. All I'm saying is that if we're going to stand here and pretend like the last few years haven't happened and people haven't been coming to the meetings, and nice to meet some of you because it's the first time I've seen you at some of these meetings. But when we were talking about it and we were coming week after week, month after month, and we were talking about the sewer sale, then the one thing that we have to do, we have to stop accusing each other of having these ulterior motives and trying to jam everybody up. I might disagree with something that the supervisors did, but I don't think that any of them are evil people. I don't think that any of them think that they're trying to take advantage of our township. And I don't think that anybody who's sitting up on the dais right now is trying to do something to jeopardize the place where they live. They're serving us. They're trying to represent us. So let's give them some slack and some credit. Now, I get kind of rough with some of the supervisors, and I say some rough things, but I have respect for them. No, I would just ask that you have respect for them as well. Thank you.
Would anyone new like to give a public comment?
Eleanor Henschel. I live on Pheasant Hill Road. I'm a 44-year resident. When I came, we had a nickname for the sewer plant, the Stink House. The problem was we didn't know what was coming from the different farms, the Clemens, you know, the little piggies that were being done. I mean, we were getting all kinds of things. They upgraded. And it's pretty much the stink is gone. Once in a while, I see it, although some of my friends in the neighborhood say, oh, well, then the wind is going in the right direction or you would smell it. My concern is this, and I think the problem has been that we've kicked the can down the road. A friend of mine who lived in Upper Gwynedd told me 10 years ago or more, and maybe that's why they pulled out, or maybe Merck helped them and they had it all paid for. I'm not really sure, because as you said, I probably haven't paid enough attention sometimes in these 44 years. I'm getting both. I understand both sides. I have two concerns only. The 14 mil that we're allowed, our rate as a second class. Okay. It limits what we can be charged. Am I correct? On our taxes.
Yeah, that's the limit from the second class township code.
Okay. I'm concerned about changing that. Okay. I don't know whether with home rule we can still keep that millage or not. I mean, I hope that's correct, that we could. My other concern is, as you pointed out, that this company has a lot of money, obviously. And maybe they do have a lot of clout. And we talk about a lot of things, are talking about deep state and all that. So we don't really know how much clout this company really has. My question here, though, is, do we have a limit in our minds as to how far we're going to go, okay, to prevent this sale? Because somebody else pointed out, you know, can we really afford it? And I do agree. It needs to be done. And we have a lot of other things that need to be done. They had to emergency do my system of getting rid of water
30 seconds,
because it
please.
was eroding the land. And so we have a lot of those pipes that are old. So I don't know what's going to happen. And of course, as a senior citizen like I am, I don't know how much longer I'll be here, but there is a limit as to how much taxes I can afford to pay. So I'm getting all of this, but I think we need to have something in our mind and say, okay, we'll go this far, but we can't let bills for fighting this get ahead of what we're going to have to pay anyway if we lose. We have to be careful of that. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. And I do appreciate what you're doing. I was not with the source of it. Mainly because, like you said, we're out of the picture. We have no control. And that bothers me. But there's enough we don't have control over.
You're at time, please.
We're getting to the point where I wonder if, you know, my front lawn is safe. You know, I was shocked to find out that I had to fix all the sidewalks and the curbs and the, you know, but where was I? I wasn't here at a meeting to say, no, you're not going to do that. Now I don't even think I own to the curb. I guess, because I had to fix everything.
Ma'am, you're at time.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry,
No, it's
Thank
fine.
you.
Thank you.
but just keep that in mind. How far do we go?
Ma'am, before you sit down, can you just let us know? Can you just let us know your name for the minutes? Here.
Would anyone new like to give a public comment?
Hello, Chris Casmar, Towamencin resident. In the draft charter, and it was in a couple of drafts, it talked about a limit on the operation of the sewer plant. I believe there's companies that operate sewer plants. Are you sure you want to limit the operation part of that? Maybe a outside firm can operate it cheaper than we are, but we would still retain control of it. That was the one question. We've been talking about, you know, canceling the sewer deal. What is the contract language for canceling the pending or the approved sale? I assume, you know, governments change all the time, board of supervisors change. There has to be some sort of language in the current contract that addresses, you know, people breach a contract, reneging on the deal. What is that language? So the other thing is we talk about the PUC. The PUC is there for our protection. You know, there's monopolies in all cases, and okay, that's fine. But we allow the PUC to, you know, regulate water and electricity and stuff like that. So, you know, do we know enough about what the PUC is allowed to do and how they make judgments? And then also, how much of the capital expenditure can they pass on? Now, if they build a new plant, they should be allowed to pass on that operation cost. Now, if they pay too much for a sewer plant, are they allowed to really pass the complete capital expenditure through to the ratepayers? Or is that part of their loss of bidding too high? So I think the PUC is supposed to be there for our protection against monopolies. And, do we know enough about how that process works and whether we're protected by it or not protected by it? So,
Thank you, Chris. And I responded to your comment from the last meeting. At our next meeting, we'll have a presentation on the sewer cell, and I'll include information about the PUC process. Would anyone new like to give a public comment?
Andrew Dolan, Towamencin Township resident. First one of these, and I'm completely overwhelmed with the information. I would like to help support making informed decisions. And I look at the commission's purpose, and the first one is to explore ways home rule could change the outcome of the pending sewer sale. I would love to see some status on that. What are some of those ways? What are the financial pros and cons if we have a math problem? How much is the sale? What would be done with that money? What's the upkeep on it? Where would that, what's the upkeep on the sewer plant? Where would that money come from? What are potential impacts? Would like to be able to make some informed decisions. So I would request that at future meetings that some of that more math is available. And also a schedule, right? I'm hearing now you should take at least 9 months to make a schedule. When did that 9 months start? When is that 9 months up? Are we obeying that 9 months? My takeaway from what I've learned tonight is we're not staying with 9 months. We're going shorter than that. Could we at least see, right, where the 9 months, a schedule maybe on the webpage, where the 9 months started, when draft, I guess we're on draft 2. When's draft 3 coming out? When are comments due? When will you respond to comments? When's the final draft? What are the next steps? That kind of stuff. Schedules and dollars would help me to make educated decisions and talk with others and influence people. So that would be helpful. And that's my request. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anyone else new like to give a public comment? Seeing none. There are a handful of emailed public comment. First one is from resident Mike Stanton. We've read various point of views as to whether or not revoking the sale to Nexera will prompt legal action from Nexera. If legal action does occur, does the commission plan to perform some sort of financial estimate regarding potential legal fees that would be associated with the trial as well as possible legal outcomes? Presumably, there could be several possible scenarios. For example, sewer sale was prevented without going to court with some legal fees. Sewer sale is prevented after a court case with additional legal fees, etc. I think it would be important to be transparent to voters as to what all the possible outcomes could be, as well as potential costs, since presumably all costs will ultimately be paid by the taxpayers. Thank you for your comment, Mike. Just to clarify, as currently written, the charter does not revoke the contract with Nexera. That would be unconstitutional. The charter prohibits all sewer sales to non-governmental entities. The sale is a regulated transaction. The contract to sell to Nexera is contingent on receiving all necessary governmental approvals. That certainly means the Public Utility Commission, the Department of Environmental Protection, the Pennsylvania General Assembly, and the United States Congress. The last two are legislative bodies that are unlikely to act on this issue soon enough to affect Towamencin, but it is within the realm of possibility that the PUC or DEP reject the sale independent of what Towamencin does with home rule. Our theory of change is that a home rule charter that prohibits the sale would have similar effect to the General Assembly or Congress doing the same, as the power to adopt a home rule charter is given to us by our state constitution in Article 9, Section 2. There is a no liability termination clause in the contract if the sale is prohibited, and we believe the township would be forced to invoke if the charter with prohibition language is adopted. As far as possible outcomes, the first thing to establish is that the PUC approval process is itself a legal proceeding, and the township is currently using tax dollars to pay legal fees to get through the sale. And if the sale closes, $800,000 of taxpayer money would go to our financial consultants. Those fees will be our frame of reference. First scenario is that the sale is terminated without any legal challenges. That is, if Towamencin or Nexera invoke the no liability termination language of the contract without challenge from the other. That is also if the PUC rejects the sale. Their criteria for approving sales is substantive public benefit. Approving a sale that might be destined to legal challenges because residents use their constitutional rights does not seem like a public benefit to me. This scenario would save taxpayer money from our frame of reference. Second scenario is that there are legal challenges that take as long as the PUC proceeding would have otherwise, but we get out of the contract. That is a break even from a taxpayer funded legal fees perspective. Third scenario is that Towamencin is subject to lengthy multi-year legal battle, but we keep the system in the end. We would lose taxpayer money in legal fees, but still save money in ratepayer excess rates. Taxpayers and ratepayers have a heavy amount of overlap. I mentioned to another commenter that the commission will give a sewer cell analysis in the next meeting, but the most charitable interpretation of the sewer cell I can come up with is that Towamencin ratepayers and taxpayers will lose $1 million a year net of the benefit of having $115 million one-time payment. The more realistic interpretation, in my opinion, is that Towamencin taxpayers and ratepayers will lose $5 to $8 million a year net of benefit. I think it could be argued that saving money on sewer rates is worth the legal fees. Fourth scenario is that Towamencin is subject to a legal battle and still has to sell the sewer system. That is the worst case scenario, and taxpayers absolutely lose money if that happens. With our solicitor's opinion, we believe either scenario 1 or 2 are likely, but acknowledge this is an untested use of home rule, and we'll try to source some sort of projected costs of the worst case scenario. I personally would lose a lot of faith in the power of our state constitution if that worst case were to happen. And another email comment from resident Sean Judge. I want to thank the Government Study Commission for its expeditious work in exploring home rule and drafting a charter for review of the residents of Towamencin Township. I particularly want to express my gratitude toward the transparent campaign that the elected commissioners ran leading up to the 2022 general election. I do not feel the elected commissioners were at all misleading regarding their intentions as to how the government study would be conducted under their leadership. To the contrary, I believe all actions taken by the commission to date have been directly in line with what was communicated during the 2022 campaign. I find it illogical to believe that 3,500 residents cast a vote for each of the elected commissioners without understanding their intent. The only misleading information regarding the government study ballot question and candidates for government study commissioner that I saw came from the group known as Towamencin Residents United Serving Towamencin, or Township Residents United Serving Towamencin, and from the Montgomery County Republican Committee through mass mailings and text blasts. We continue to see the effect of said misleading information as residents provide public comment with concern related to raising township tax limits. The elected commissioners were crystal clear and continue to be so when it comes to their position that a home rule charter would not be used to alter tax limits in Towamencin. In my opinion, any individual that was involved or in or behind the dissemination of the misleading information concerning any of the elected commissioners is truly irresponsible and deplorable. Thanks again to Kofi, Tina, Jen, Martin, Gazella, Mark, and Joseph for their hard work for looking out for the interests of the residents of Towamencin Township. Thank you, Sean. And the last email comment is from resident Nancy Becker. What happens when a home rule charter conflicts with the charter or bylaws of another municipal authorities? For example, the North Bend Water Authority, which supplies drinking water to Towamencin, has its own charter. What would happen if the charter were to vote to bring in a company such as Aqua to oversee the day-to-day operations of the authority, which would be prohibited by the proposed home rule charter? I wouldn't think that a home rule charter can impose tax limits or on other municipal governments, can it? Great question, Nancy. Thank you for your comment. Towamencin is an incorporating municipality of the North Bend Water Authority and is in some aspects a part owner. Most of the sewer privatization agreements and water, including the one Towamencin entered with Nexera, have the consent of both the authority and all incorporating municipalities. The intention of that provision was to affect Towamencin's vote in any such agreement. We currently own or are an incorporating municipality of our potable water, wastewater, and stormwater systems. I'm actually not a huge fan of the way PA sets up municipal authorities, and I believe it's causing a few problems with these acquisitions. The general question of independence of an authority from its incorporating members does not seem clear to me, but I will forward your question to our solicitors. As far as the likelihood of finding out in Towamencin, the executive director at North Bend Water Authority, Tony Bolito, has told the press that North Bend Water Authority would not sell water to Aqua if Aqua were to ever buy the Bucks County water sewers, the water system. The North Wales Water Authority, who jointly run the Forest Park Treatment Plant, wrote a letter to Chris Franklin, CEO of Aqua's parent company, Essential Utilities, saying the same thing. With the joint operation of the water treatment plant and the regional setup of North Bend Water Authority, it would take quite a few changes of heart to set up the operating arrangement you described. We did allow the options for short-term leases if North Bend Water Authority ever wants or needs to approach private industry. And is there any other comments or business from the rest of the commission? Would anyone like the motion to adjourn?
Yes, motion.
Motion a second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned.